Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I am Melanie Wowk. I am chair of the Alberta Beef Producers. I, along with my family, ranch in the Northeast Zone near Bavalin, which is in the county of Two Hills, for anybody that's wondering. Please be aware that we are recording this meeting and it will be available on abpdaily.com. I would like to begin by acknowledging the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation and expressing our appreciation for all people who steward the land, both past and present. The majority of you did attend the ABP semi-annual meeting that just took place, but for those of you who didn't, I'd like to welcome you. We had a really good discussion around the direction of ABP, and now we really would like to hear from our producers. So I'll give you just a quick recap of some of ABP's work over the past few months. This year began with significant producer concern around Alberta government's decision to rescind an outdated policy on coal production, leaving areas of the province open to coal development. ABP did call for the government to reinstate the policy until appropriate public consultation was completed, and the government has done so. And public consultation is currently taking place with the final recommendations due by November 15th of this year. ABP's new communications tools also rolled out over the past year, and that has allowed us for a broad spectrum of options to be provided for producers to connect and engage with ABP. These tools will continue to evolve and to ensure that ABP maintains a strong connection with its producers. At the end of May, producers across the country welcomed news from the Organization for Animal Health announcing Canada's move to negligible risk status for BSE. In order to maintain this status, Canada must continue its efforts in complying with the OIE's Terrestrial Animal Health Code, which includes meeting minimum surveillance requirements. This includes continued submission of samples from eligible animals with a $75 payment to the producer. Significant discussions have taken place with the board of directors relating to ABP's direction and financial situation. At a 46% refund rate, the board has been forced to make some tough decisions about the future of ABP. I would like to emphasize that the current checkoff refund rate solely reflects the dollars that are being refunded, and in no way does it reflect the vast majority of producers who support our organization. As chair, I want producers to recognize what ABP does on behalf of Alberta's beef industry and to see a direct connection from checkoff dollars to solutions that support Alberta's beef sector. Our work this past summer to support producers through this drought and secure financial aid is a good example of what checkoff dollars allowed us to aggressively pursue. We had countless conversations with government officials, provided recommendations for financial support systems, held a town hall to keep producers informed, and made sure producers always had access to the most up-to-date information through abpdaily.com, the ABP app, and media outlets. The ABP executive hosted the premier and other members and other ministers, on a ranch tour so they could see and feel the devastation the drought and excessively high temperatures had on our pastures and crops. We are hopeful that the resources that ABP helped to secure, that we will make it through this drought with the least possible impact on mother cow numbers. As I wrap up, I want to remind you that ABP delegate nominations are open until midnight tonight. There's still time to get a nomination form if you're interested in running for a delegate position. This is your business, and I would really like to see you be the reason to make it stronger. I'd now like to introduce AFSC CEO Daryl Kay, Jason Turner, Manager, Lending and Agri-Stability Products, and Daniel Graham, Manager, Insurance Products. They're here to provide an overview of the AgriRecovery program, which is the Canada-Alberta Livestock Feed Assistance Initiative. We'll take questions following their presentation, and then you'll have an opportunity to break out into your zones. Daryl, I think you're first up.
Thank you, Melanie. You can hear me okay?
You bet.
Excellent. Well, thank you for providing us the opportunity to present today. As Melanie mentioned, we have a few individuals with us today. I'm going to just do a short introduction and then let them take over. A couple different things we wanted to cover. Number one is definitely the AgriRecovery initiative. Jason Turner, the manager in our product area, will speak to the Canada-Alberta Livestock Feed Assistance Program. So this is a significant undertaking for AFSC, one of the largest initiatives in size and scope that we've been involved with at least in the last decade. So team members from across the province stepped up, really helped support this program. I was proud to see. We do know that there was challenges though. No challenges in the time it took to work with the province and the federal government to develop the program, time to deliver the program, and some of the challenges that come with the size and scope of a program like this. So I can tell you we're always looking to try to find ways to improve, try to find ways so that we're prepared the next time this comes along. So really looking forward to feedback today. In terms of the actual program, I know there was a number of payments that were released, I believe, this week for that first payment, the first part of that program. But I think Jason's going to spend a lot of his time today really focusing on the second payment. We're often, we're getting a number of questions. We understand there's some confusion out there, just trying to understand and provide some clarity to what we need when it comes to things like receipt-based and feed needs. So that's really going to be the focus of the second part of that discussion today. The other piece I'll talk to just briefly, Daniel Graham, our manager of insurance products, is on the call as well, and he's going to be talking about some of the insurance programs for forage crops. Again, a really challenging year when it comes to the insurance programs and how they responded. I know there's been a number of questions asked and concerns raised. So we're taking a pretty close look at those programs, always wanting to make sure that they're relevant and they're working. And so we have some things planned in terms of what that might happen, what might occur as we move into next year. So the two big main topics again are AgriRecovery, and then we'll spend some time on insurance. So I'm going to ask Jason Turner to jump in and talk a bit about AgriRecovery.
Perfect. Thanks, Daryl. And Melanie, I'm going to try to share my screen here. I assume I'll have the ability to do that. And I'll get this teed up here. Good. Assuming everybody can see that. Got the thumbs up. Good. Okay. So I want to jump right into presentation here. I'll just give a quick recap of the Canada-Alberta Livestock Feed Assistance Initiative, what we're calling CALFA, as I'm sure many of you are aware of some of these particulars. But again, the initial payment, phase one, when we're talking about beef cattle, was $94 per head. It's based on inventory levels as at August 6th. As Daryl mentioned, payments started going out the door this week. The initial direct deposits and checks were cut. I believe between Tuesday and Wednesday, we pushed approximately $54 million out the door in that initial processing round. And we're continuing to push payments out the door over these next few days as we get them processed through our system. The secondary payment, or the balance, because the total the coverage for the initiative was up to $200 per head. So the secondary payment covers that $106 per head. It's going to be based on inventory as of December 31st, 2021. And there's a couple of ways that that will be calculated. And I guess I want to go through a couple of the questions that have come out about the secondary payment and how it's going to work in terms of applications. And first and foremost, what I want to say is that we tried, or our efforts were to try and make the response as all-encompassing as possible. We didn't want to prejudice or disadvantage. Not all of the producers responded to the drought in the same way. So some may have gone out and purchased feed. Others may have changed their feeding practices, dipped into their own feed stocks. There's a number of different ways that producers have responded to these drought conditions. So first and foremost, what I want to say is that phase 2 is designed to be flexible. And there's a couple of different ways that these calculations or these claims can be processed. So one is what we're calling our feed need calculation. And if you reference our terms and conditions, which are posted on our website under the AgriRecovery link, it will show you what that formula for the feed need calculation is. Really, the essence of the feed need calculation is that it takes into account at what point in time did you as a producer have to change your normal pasture feeding practices. And it'll ask, for, what approximately what that date was, and then the number of days that you had to alter that feeding practice. And you'll fill that into the formula, and there's some calculations in there in terms of feed costs per day, and it'll calculate a claim number based on that formula. And so this is really to say, in those situations where you didn't just run out or go out and purchase additional feed, you fed maybe from your own resources or by shifting your animals to pasture that normally you would have rested or whatever. You've done something different in your feeding practices. When did you start doing that? And how long did you do it for? And that'll help through that formula to calculate that second portion of the claim. Based on kind of a high level run through, approximately 95 days of that change practice through the feed need calculation, so 3 months, would max out your claim to that $200 mark. So that's the first initial phase payment plus the additional second phase payment of $106 through that calculation. The second way, and I know there's been a lot of talk or questions about, well, why do I need to provide receipts? Because that's potentially another way to claim these extraordinary expenses. And if you read the terms and conditions, it references receipts as an option. It actually refers to proof of expense. So again, we're trying to be as expansive and encompassing as possible. So it references proof of expense, and there may be different things that could be provided for that proof of expense. Receipts is an option if you have a receipt for those additional expenses, but we're not being prescriptive in that. There may be other agreements or proof of expense that can be provided. The terms and conditions reference that it's to be provided, the administration, that's us, AFSC, though that proof of expense has to be acceptable to the administration. And we'll work with producers in terms of that verification proof of expense that they're going to provide. And secondly, what I want to say is these are not proof of expenses that we're asking for producers to submit with their application. Frankly, we don't have the capacity to receive and process, shoeboxes full of receipts or costs. We're leaving that to the producer, similar to the first application where it was in phase 1, where it was basically a declaration of the number of animals you had on hand on August 6th. What we envision for our secondary phase 2 application will be similar to that, either through the feed need calculation or a declaration of what those additional expenses are supported by proof of expense. That's what would be claimed. And we leave it to the producer that if selected through a post-payment verification process, that those proofs would have to be provided and demonstrated to support that claim. So we're not asking you to scan receipts, send them in with applications. We're asking you to have those available if that post-payment verification is asked of you. Beyond that, it's by declaration on the form. I think there's maybe a couple of other questions that have come to me, and I'm just going to take a look at my cheat sheet here. So again, if depending, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. So for example, if you're using the feed need model, and it may get you to a certain amount of your claim, but then you have proof of expense for additional expenses over and above that, you can combine those two methods to max out the claim that you're making. So it's not one, option A or option B. It can be either or a combination of the two in terms of the application process. Another question that's come up in terms of animals that are covered, are heifer calves included? It's intended to cover those cattle that are bred prior to December 31st. So, and that is going to be clarified. There's a couple of slight changes to the terms and conditions that are posted, that are in the process of being made. That's one item that will be clarified in the terms and conditions in terms of the cattle that will be included in the response. One of the other items that will be clarified is horses, in terms of any recreational rodeo stock type animals will be in the ineligible category. And I think there's been some confusion about that in terms of which types of animals are included. So again, just a quick run through of the numbers, and these would have changed since yesterday, but we have received, so we went live with applications on September 7th. One of the questions that I think has come up is, why did it take us, maybe a little bit of time to get ready to receive applications? One of the reasons for that is we spent some time at the front end to ensure that we had an online delivery system that was available and viable and workable for applicants, because the quickest way for us to flow funds ultimately was to have an online delivery system, and then for applicants to sign up for direct deposit with AFSC. We encourage you to do that. If you haven't done that, we can flow payments by check. But again, for the quickest delivery, we wanted to be prepared and able to deliver as quickly as possible funds directly into producer accounts. So we went live with applications on September 7th. As of Tuesday this week, we've had approximately 7,000 applications for $107 million, covering 1.2 million animals. Now, some of these numbers are the raw numbers, and there's some validation and verification in terms of eligibility, et cetera. But again, as of yesterday, we had begun to put money out the door, approximately $54 million processed, and that number will continue to go up over the next little while as we continue to work our way through the applications that we've received. Applications for phase one remain open until October 31st. We expect to go live with applications for phase two that first week of January, because again, it's based on inventory as at December 31st. So again, we encourage you, if you haven't already, in order to apply for phase one or phase two, and if you haven't applied for phase two, it doesn't preclude you for applying under, sorry, if you haven't applied for phase one or don't apply for phase one, it doesn't preclude you for applying for phase two. It's not an either or both. We assume that you will have applied for phase one, but if you haven't or don't, you can still apply for phase two. Get yourself set up as an AFSC client in our AFSC Connect system with an account. We encourage you to sign up for direct deposit. It will be the fastest way for you to receive funds once your claim is processed. Fill out the online application that's available once you're set up as a client. And if you have any questions or concerns or need assistance, please contact our AFSC client service center or a local branch, or use our online chat feature. What I will say is that due to, again, as Daryl alluded to, the scale of this response is much larger than anything that we've seen in over a decade, I would say. We do experience high volumes of calls and contacts. We're working diligently to work our way through those contacts that are made. So if you reach out to us and you're not able to connect immediately, we have processes in place. We are going to respond back to you as quick as we can, but please reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns.
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in there. One of the things we've tried to do over the last week or two is we've allocated some team members from across a number of areas in our organization, recognizing that, I think there were some hiccups in that first week with the timing it took for people to get through. And so we've been able to improve those turnaround times significantly. And so I feel fairly confident that we've allocated appropriate resources to help us with that. So Melanie, I think we'll stop there before we let Daniel kind of jump into the insurance side and maybe open it up if there are some questions about AgriRecovery.
I believe, so we can either go for questions, either hands up or through the chat. I don't think anything's come through the chat yet, so we'll start with Colin. Can I just say one thing before we start with Colin, is I really want to thank you guys, because there was an extremely swift response from AFSC, and we needed that, and we got it, and thank you very much. Also, there were some hiccups. I experienced a hiccup in trying to get onto the deposit, and I just wanted to shout out right now to the St. Paul office, because extremely helpful. She even phoned me back to make sure it was working. And so I just really want to commend you guys, because I mean, it's a lot of people very quickly wanting a lot of money. So thank you. I just had to spit that out.
Appreciate that feedback. We'll pass that on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colin, sorry, I think we're ready for you.
Okay, so phase 2, your application process, you wouldn't apply for that before December 31st then, right?
We're looking at having the applications go live in January, because again, it's a combination of that feed need and then your inventory on hand as of December 31st.
Okay, so basically what we have to do is have everybody count their cows as of December 31st and then their extra, but you'd start, like my case, I'm going to have to start feeding now, and I don't start, well, my swath grazing is about half of what it's going to be, so I'm going to have to start supplementing with some bales. So, and I don't normally start feeding bales until mid-December. That's been my normal for the past 5-6 years anyway.
Yeah, for sure. So again, if you reference the terms and conditions, that window of time that's taken into account is retroactive to June 1st. So again, we're trying to be inclusive as possible in terms of that period of time that these extra expenses have been incurred. So starting June 1 to December 31st is the window. So again, it's either through that feed need model or yes, as producers, please be keeping track of those proof of expense, whether that's receipts or other proof of expense that you may have. But that window of time is starting June 1.
Thank you.
Kent, you had a question?
No, I think that was answered there. So thank you.
Okay.
So we've got a question from Fred Lozman in the chat. Fred says, thanks, Jason. Can you give some examples of a proof on expense that wouldn't be a simple invoice or receipt?
Sure, that's a good question. And we tried, I think, to be maybe a little bit vague in that, because frankly, I don't know that we know what that might look like. There might have been agreements for service or exchange of goods or what it might have been. Frankly, we don't know what imaginative ways you may have come up with to keep your animals fed and keep things moving. So I don't have a specific example of what that might be. Again, it's to the administration, who is us, to determine whether it's acceptable or not. and it's not, and we kind of wanted to take that out of the hands. Of course, these agreements are agreements that we agree, between the province and our federal partners. But we wanted to have some control over, who's making the decisions on the ground, in Alberta in those cases. So when you're justifying what that proof of expense is, it's got to be reasonable from our perspective, and we're going to strive to, not be saying, well, that's no good. It's really, what do you think that is, and what does it verify in your minds? And we've seen, so far we've seen a couple of different things. So, the way I would look at it is, if you pay money for extra feed and you have a receipt, that's great. Maybe you didn't have cash and there was an exchange of equipment for feed or something. Like, we don't know what that might look like, but is there a documented transaction? We're going to take that into consideration for what would qualify under the program.
Hopefully that answers Fred's question. Is there another one there, Caitlin, or is that it?
Another one just came through. Melissa Downing would like to know, what if it's not a matter of buying extra feed, but just spending more for feed and paying extra trucking because it was further away?
Well, yeah, again, if you're paying, whether you're, what the market price is for feed, again, if that's documented and there's receipts for that, you can claim that. There is, and trucking, water hauling, there's a number of things listed in the terms and conditions that qualify as extraordinary expenses. I believe pregnancy tests are listed in there, water hauling, temporary fencing. There's a number of things that would qualify over and above feed that you can claim as extraordinary expenses. If we get questions about, well, what if I don't have a receipt? I had to haul feed, or I had to haul animals, using my own vehicles. Again, in the terms and conditions, there's an amount allocated in there that you can claim for kilometers, like charge per kilometer, and make a claim based on that. So, what would be the proof of the expense? Well, maybe, tell us where you moved them from and how far it is, and how are you justifying your claim if you're doing it that way? But there is some allowance for that in the terms and conditions for a per kilometer charge that you could claim if you're not hiring somebody to do it for you and getting a receipt for it.
So Kathy Sharp would like to know, what is the thought process for not including heifer calves in producers' inventory to qualify for payment?
So again, the focus was on bred cattle, and we wanted to open it up. And there was some confusion at the outset in terms of, what was the definition of that. And we have to have a cutoff at some point in terms of, what are we considering eligible animals and the intent of the response. And, in discussion with our provincial, federal partners and with industry, we landed on that definition of well, what is a bred animal having been bred prior to December 31st. So I don't have any, there's questions about, well, what about into 2022 and beyond? And really it's about these needs that came about in the summer of 2021. And then, covering some of those costs, up into, as we begin going into winter of 2021. So I don't have really more of an explanation other than that, it wasn't an arbitrary decision from AFSC. It was in consultation with other partners.
Brody's got a question.
Yeah, hi Jason. Thanks for taking questions and talking with us today. I guess my question is around producers that have been forced to sell off animals as the only solution or what they felt was the best solution to get themselves through winter. Will they be able to apply the, I guess, the savings that they would see in feed against this program? So say they sold off 40% of their herd and it saved them $100,000 of feed. That didn't lead to an expense that they had to go out and buy feed, but at the same time, they're seeing a negative impact on their operation. Will they be eligible to apply and use that management decision as a way to trigger a payment for the animals that they still have on their operation?
Sure. I don't have a specific answer for you on that, Brody. We know that, producers have made certain decisions at different times and at different stages. While we've tried to be as encompassing as we can, we're not going to, it doesn't allocate, for every single scenario or decisions that have been made. So my initial response is no, I don't believe it would cover that scenario, but I'm writing your question down, and if we can provide more clarity on that to you, we'll do so.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Jason?
Yeah, hi, Jason. Thanks for spending your time answering our questions. One question I've had quite a bit from producers is why aren't bulls included in this payment? The statement's the only way you get a bred cows with a bull. So lots of producers down here are wondering why bulls were not included.
Yeah, and again, that was in consultation with industry and with our partners. And the decision was the focus was on breeding females, and that was going to be the focus of the response. I guess maintaining that market for bulls, but we wanted to focus in on the breeding females, and that's been kind of the focus from the outset.
Any other questions? If not, was there more you wanted to add, Daryl? Thanks, Jason, for that. It was a very good explanation. Answered a lot of my questions too.
Yeah, no, really good questions. And obviously whenever we're working with partners like the province and the federal government, I mean, we've had a number of questions about other animals and what's included and what's not. And they're not easy decisions to make, but we kind of follow that direction from government. So appreciate the questions, and thanks, Jason, for answering those. So I think we're ready to move on to Daniel from the insurance side.
Sure. Daniel?
Thank you. I just want to do a quick review of some of our forage programs. Most of you are probably familiar with them. Our pasture programs, we have two: moisture deficiency insurance, which is available across all the province, and it's a weather derivative based on moisture accumulations. Satellite yield insurance, which is primarily only available in southern Alberta and parts of the eastern part, east central part of the province. It uses a satellite measurement of light absorptions of forage to estimate growth within the pastures. We also have hay insurance. It's production based, and it has an elective moisture deficiency endorsement, which similar to moisture deficiency insurance, it can make payments on accumulated precipitation at elected weather stations. We also have silage green feed on part of our annual crops. Two options there. One's the lack of moisture, and similar to moisture deficiency, you elect weather stations, and it's based on accumulated precipitation to estimate yields. And then we have barley proxy, which takes the actual yields from reported yields for the particular township that the lands are located to determine yields and payments. And finally, we have a corn heat unit product. It's not well known, but it is available only for irrigated crops, primarily in southern Alberta, and it's for corn grain and corn silage, in which if you don't have adequate heat units, it could trigger benefits. If you can get the next slide, please. Thank you. Now, we know we have some issues with our weather-based products, primarily those products that have moisture measurements, moisture deficiency insurance, the silage green feed lack of moisture, the moisture deficiency elective for hay, all have some concerns with it. Weather-based derivative products like those have a inherent risk of basis risk, meaning that the payments you're receiving may not necessarily match the losses that you realize on your farm. And this year particularly, we have seen the basis risks be exceptionally high. As a result, there's been significant requests for changes to the payment calculations for these programs. Just to give a background that, again, as crop insurance, our programs are actuarially based. They are certified by third parties to ensure the long-term sustainability of these programs. Any changes made to the programs require approval from our stakeholders, primarily the federal government. And the changes have to be within the context of our CAP agreement. And then any change also has impacts to the cost shared premiums and can shift liability amongst the province or to producers, the province and the federal government. It depends on the situation and timing and when the changes are made. Yeah, next slide, please. Next slide, Jason, if you can.
Sorry, Daniel, my computer's not agreeing.
Right. So anticipating the slide change, we know that there's challenges with these programs, and we're working to try to make these programs more responsive and relevant for our clients and our stakeholders. And some of the things we're currently working on is we are reviewing the minimum and maximum precipitation tolerances that are used for program calculations, and are looking to see what adjustments could be made for those. We're also looking at adjustments to accumulated participation when extreme heat events occur, like we've seen this year. We're also investigating the use of personalized weather stations, in which we could use data from them to augment the weather data we currently use with our programs, and also investigating other remote sensing technologies to use for soil moisture and biomass measurements. When I mean soil moisture, remote sensing technologies, it'd be like satellite technology or soil moisture probes as an example. And we're trying to see if these technologies could replace our current programs. In short, I guess I said that we've had some challenges, but the programs have actually paid probably the highest dollar amount. They have paid the highest dollar amounts we've seen since inception. So I'll open the floor for questions.
Thanks, Daniel. No questions from anybody? You're gonna get off easy.
We had some questions that came through an email yesterday, and I think there were some questions in regards to the measurement of precipitation. It's probably I can tell you what AFSC does, but actual measurements from the weather stations are probably better for AF, but I will share what my understanding is. So as far as the programs are concerned with precipitation, any day, meaning from 12 a.m. to 11:49 p.m., any accumulated precipitation that is less than 1/10 of a millimeter is deemed to be zero. So we do not include that in our calculation. There's also questions of what happens as the accumulation goes up. It's also my understanding that that accumulation has to hit the next threshold. I think the term is a tourniquet. So if you have 1.25 millimeters, will be measured as 1.2 millimeters. If you have 1.31 millimeters, it'll be measured as 1.3 millimeters. It has to hit the threshold before it's counted, is my understanding, for the accumulations. And the purpose of this is to ensure that trace amounts and other accumulations are in favor of the measurement for potentially triggering indemnifications in the current years.
Define your weather stations, and do you have a standard for equipment? How do you determine what a weather station, like what is a weather station?
There's a network of weather stations that are maintained by Alberta Agriculture and Forestry and Environment Canada that are part of the network that is used in which we receive our data. It's administered by Agriculture and Forestry, and they provide that data to us. The standards, I'm not as well versed in regards to the standards, but I understand that they are state-of-the-art weather stations. As far as what those standards are, I can't comment at the moment, but I can get back to you on that, Brody.
Yeah, and we were involved with a few town halls with some people from the department and talked a bit about that, and they do some pretty extensive testing throughout the year to make sure they are working and they are accurate and they're reasonable based on what they see for rain in the area. So there's a lot of work that goes into the weather stations.
Brody, you had a question?
Yeah, so mine is also around that 0.1 millimeter minimum rainfall amount. Down in the southeast, there's a specific rainfall station where there was approximately 11 events days that were recorded as 0.1 millimeters. And AFSC chose to not record 9 of them, but used 2 of them in their final calculations. And it, on our operation, cost us $10,000 payout. So my question is, why would some 0.1 millimeter rainfall events be used in the calculation and some not?
You're grabbing the data from AF's website, I'm assuming, on that, Brody.
Yes.
We get the raw data and a data download, and our first criteria is anything that is less than 0.1 millimeter from that raw data may not be rounded. At that point, we remove, and then we have the triaging activity that occurs at that point forward. Tourniquet activity is my understanding. But it would mean that of the 11 events that you're providing me or giving an example would not have met may have been rounded to 0.1, but would not have met the actual 0.1 threshold.
So just to further clarify that, rainfall is measured beyond 1/10 of a millimeter?
Yes. It's either 1/10 and more. Anything equaling 1/10 or more is measured.
Any other questions? If not, anything else, Daryl, you'd like to say to wrap up?
I just say that, in terms of some of the forage programs, specifically MDI, we are planning a number of input advisory groups over the winter, which we do every year. But one of the focuses when we reach out to producers and try to get feedback, we are going to focus on MDI this year, given what we saw and the conditions that, the extreme heat, wind, some of the other things we saw really highlighted the challenges with the program. So we are, to Daniel's point, trying to improve that, but we're going to gather some more input from producers throughout the winter. So,
Daryl, I think we're trying to aim for November meetings for that.
Good.
And I just really want to stress that we really ask producers to be involved in those, because you are specifically asking for input, and we often get the frustrating comment that nobody's listening. Well, you can't listen unless you voice your opinion. So I really hope that there's some producer engagement there.
Great. Good.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us. And we really, really appreciate your time that you've given to our town hall today and answered some of these questions. I'll be able to give some better answers myself, and thanks for taking the time this afternoon.
Thank you. We
Thanks
appreciate
for
it.
having us. Yeah.
So before we move into our zones, I would like to mention that the James Hargrave Legacy Foundation is accepting applications for its fund established in memory of James Hargrave. James was a young rancher and leader in the cattle industry. In addition to his role as chairman of the Alberta Grazing Leaseholders Association, vice president of the Western Stock Growers Association, and also a volunteer firefighter for his community, James was also actively involved with Alberta beef producers. The foundation promotes excellencies and efficiencies in the Canadian beef industry by providing annual awards to individuals or groups. Promotion of intergenerational knowledge transfer, exploration into the improvement of grasslands and grassland management, and work done to progress a marketplace for ecosystem services are key focus areas. The application deadline is quickly approaching. It is August 15th. Anyone who's interested can go to jameshargravelegacy.com, or else they are welcome to contact Lindsay Dunbar at 403-250-9121. And I believe that we will have those up in the chat momentarily. I'm now going to ask everyone to move into their zone breakout rooms. Each breakout room will have a zone coordinator that will help guide the discussion and provide producers with an opportunity to bring forth resolutions. Any resolutions carried today will be included in the resolution process following our 2022 producer meetings and elections. These meetings will take place at the end of January and the beginning of February 2022. You can select enter breakout room at the bottom of your screen and choose your zone. If you don't know what zone you belong to or are having trouble moving into the breakout room, just wait here in this main room. Raise your hand with the reactions button and somebody's going to help you. Once the meeting has concluded, you're free to leave and we do not need to reconvene in the main meeting room. So just right now, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this town hall, and I wish you all a safe fall.